Oh my god, it is here. Let's have a look. Reanimation Protocol does what? A new stratagem? What is that? The Void Dragon, how many points? Oh my god, what have they done to Heavy Destroyers? How am I going to cope? So many new rules. Well, have no fear, because today I'm going to share my top 10 tips for learning a new codex, and it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to learn about Necrons and more, then please subscribe and hit the bell button to turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so here we go, the first video in a series of videos of learning this codex. However, today we're learning how to learn a new codex, because I know there's a lot of you out there where this is your first army, or maybe you haven't played Necrons for a long time and things have changed quite a bit. This is a brand new release, a new set of miniatures, a new set of rules, and a lot of additional rules that we haven't had before, so it's a big learning curve even for me as a long time Necron player. So yeah, today my top 10 tips on how to learn a new codex. So let's get straight into it with tip number 1. Okay, so tip number 1, slow down. I mean, the whole reason for this video today is because literally I was flicking all over the place trying to, well, basically fathom some of the changes, and I realised I was doing it far too quick. The best way to learn a codex is to slow down and learn one thing at a time. I mean, even the greatest reader, the greatest learner in the world isn't going to be able to learn the whole thing in one go. It's best to break your learning down into sections. So when you look at the codex, think, right, I'm going to look at this particular piece of war gear, this particular army-wide rule, or maybe just this particular unit. And just like when you're learning anything in life, it's best to not learn too much in one go, because, well, your brain just won't retain all the information. So take 15 minutes, have a look at a particular area of the book, a particular rule, study that, learn it, then have a break and come back and learn some more later. This way you will learn your codex a lot quicker. Okay, so tip number 2. Select some of your favourite units and compare the new rules with the old ones. I know, sounds simple, right? And of course, some of the units don't have old rules, but the units that do, select some of your favourite ones, not all of them, because we're trying to make this easier to learn. In my case, it would be Wraiths and Flayed ones, so I would get the old rulebook and compare all of the stats and the points with the new ones. I already know how the unit works quite well, so any changes are going to be highlighted quite easily and easy to learn. Do this with your favourite units and the units you use most often, and you'll soon be learning the codex. Now, if this is just your first codex, maybe your first army, or you're just new to Necrons and you haven't got any of the old data cards or units, or you've got no experience to compare them to, well, this is still a bit of an advantage, because you're not going to get confused with any of the old rules. So all of the rules that you learn, you're going to learn for the first time, and that means they're going to be easier to remember because you don't have any changes to worry about. Okay, so tip number 3, use your army that you already have to learn. Now, I know some of you won't already have an army or an army list that you generally play, but if you do, then this is a fantastic tool to help you learn the army quickly, and indeed you will be seeing me do this very soon. Now, the advantage of using an existing army or army list that you've already played is, of course, you know the army inside out, and although the rules have changed quite a bit in this codex, to the point that, well, some of the slots have changed as well, so you may have to do a lot of jiggling, but if you can play the army as close to what it was originally, well, you're in a good place because you already know how the army works and what the units generally do, even if they have a few extra gun options. You may have to do things like take an auxiliary detachment just to get the units in the list, maybe use CPs for that, which of course, normal list building, well, you wouldn't do that, but for learning it doesn't really matter, because the key thing here is to learn the units, to play with the units, get to know the units, and of course the changes. Now it's fair to say, especially with such a major change as this codex, that a lot of our current lists aren't going to work in the new rule book. However, it doesn't mean they're not playable, and certainly not a good tool to get used to the rules. And then once you've played a few games, of course, you can start to introduce some of the new units or new rules into the list and changing things around. It's a good way to see how the rules are playing from what you used to play to, of course, how they play now. As I said, I'm going to be doing this myself, my Necrons 2020 list, which I've been playing with great success both in 8th edition and the beginning of 9th edition. I'm going to adapt that list to the new codex, and that's going to be my starting point. I do foresee that list changing quite a bit, or even a brand new list, but it's a great starting point, and you will see that on the channel here with some battle reports and maybe a new army list video. Actually, if you'd like to see a new army list video, then let me know in the comments box below. Oh, and stay tuned to the end of the video because I've got 2 bonus tips. Okay, so tip number 4 is to play small games. Playing small games really helps you learn the rules. If you're really new to 40k, I'd recommend around 500 to 750 points. If you've got a little bit of experience, then I'd recommend 1,000 to maybe 1,500, although I'd actually stick around 1,000 points. At 1,000 points you can get quite a few little units in your list, and then you can gradually learn the rules with those units. It's good if you can play someone who knows that you're just experimenting with the rules, with the models, because of course that's going to make it a little bit easier to play the game and not feel under pressure to blast your opponent off the table. If the other person knows you're just learning the rules, then hopefully they'll help you learn the rules along the way. Having said that, if you do lose, then don't take it to heart, because just remember you're only experimenting, you're only learning. And as I always learnt from my favourite YouTube channel, Wargamer Fritz, is your first 20 games of 40k with a particular army doesn't mean a thing. It's only once you've played 20 games with that army you can then actually start thinking, I know this army and now I'm going to try to win. So just bear that in mind. Don't play to win, play to learn. The other thing about small games is you can get more than one game in an evening. So if you're playing 500 points, you could get 2 or 3 games in with maybe different lists. And again, it's just a great way to learn the army and the rules. Okay, so tip number 5. It's a good idea to learn the army-wide rules first. Things that will affect more than one unit, because, well, basically you'll be learning more than if you just learnt a single rule for a single unit. So we're talking about things like reanimation protocol, the command protocol, living metal, quantum shielding, the rules which affect quite a few units. That will really help you be familiar with a lot of the rules within the army. Army-wide rules, learn them first. Okay, so tip number 6. Watch YouTube channels, in particular my one. No, obviously watching YouTube channels, especially battle reports channels, seeing how other people have their lists and how they perform on the table is really useful. But what I find the most useful is the comments sections of those videos, of my videos. There's a wealth of knowledge out there, and whilst obviously I can share what I know or what I think, Of course, everyone thinks differently, everyone has different ideas, and I really enjoy reading all of the comments and feedback that I get from you guys, and it's just a great place to learn about Necrons, particular rules and tactics and army list builds, etc. Obviously you could go outside of YouTube like the Necrons Facebook page, but do bear in mind that some of those places you do get quite a bit of negativity, and that is one thing that I do like to bring to my channel, and that's positivity. Even the worst unit is playable. All you have to do is work around the unit and learn how to play it. Because everything is playable in one way or the other. You may have to do certain things like build an army list around that unit, or potentially just take multiples of that one unit which isn't quite as good to help you with unit redundancy. All this we will cover in the future. But for now though, yeah, just subscribe to some YouTube channels. The ones that do battle reports, especially with Necrons in, can be very useful as a learning tool. And of course, I'll be having battle reports here on this channel as well. So if you're not subscribed, then yeah, subscribe. And while you're there, why not like? Because we all like people that ask for likes, shares, comments and subscribe. Okay, so tip number 7. Take your codex wherever you can. Of course, it could be a little bit big to carry around. So how about just taking your data cards, or potentially the app on your phone, or even just a photocopy of some pages in the codex. You never know when you're going to get an opportunity to learn when you're out and about. Use the moments that you have free when you're out and about, like when you're waiting for a bus or you've got a bus journey, maybe in your lunch break at work. Use those moments to study a few rules. Learning little and often can really help you get to grips with the codex. Usually better than reading the whole thing in one go. So yeah, take some rules with you when you go out and about. Okay, so tip number 8. Learn and play one dynasty only. We all have our favourite dynasties. Maybe we've painted our armies in a particular dynasty colour, or maybe we just like the fluff of the armies. However, playing with just one dynasty will mean that you're going to learn the dynasty rules a bit quicker, regardless of the reason for choosing that dynasty. You only have to worry about one warlord trait or certain stratagems which work with that dynasty only. You can learn those first. So it just makes learning an army a little bit easier if you're learning it around one dynasty and one set of dynasty rules. So to start with, just play with one dynasty. But which dynasty is the best, I hear you say? Well, like I said, when you're starting out, it doesn't really matter about picking the best rules. But what matters is, I don't know, because I've forgotten. What was I going to say? Which is the best in terms of the rules. What matters is that you just learn one at a time, because it will really be useful. And of course, I will be covering all of the different dynasties and the special rules that go around them in additional videos in the series. But for now, I would suggest you just pick one and play with it and learn the rules around it. That will keep you in good stead. Okay, so tip number 9. Don't forget to learn the rules that aren't in your codex. So when you're looking at your data cards, there will be some things on there like the keywords which the rules aren't in your book. You have to go to the main core rule book. Things like the beast special rule, the monster rule, the fly special rule. Try to learn how the terrain works. All these things will help you learn your army and also help you learn how the units interact with the game itself. Very useful. Okay, so tip number 10. If you have any minis to build or paint, well, that's a great time to learn the rules. Listening to tactical videos or battle reports whilst you paint or you build, well, of course, that's very useful, but I don't actually mean that. I mean, let's say you are building Necron wraiths. Well, as you build them, try to learn the rules for that unit. As you paint them, try to remember all of the stats. Then, when they're complete and you're playing a game, you already know the rules. That is useful. Okay, so bonus tip to learning this rule book. Now, when we make army lists, we're generally striving to have a battalion, and a battalion only has certain amounts of slots. So let's say heavy support, for example. You can only have 3 slots in the battalion detachment. So why learn all of the heavy support choices when you only need 3? I would recommend, especially when starting out, to just pick your 3 favourite heavy support choices and then just learn those. And of course, when I say favourite, I mean your favourite miniature, or maybe the favourite story around the miniature. In actual fact, you may only need to learn 1 of those choices, because you could have up to 3 of the same unit. So if you like, for example, the Doomstalker, where you may only need to learn the rules for that, and then you can have 2 or 3 of those in your list. Reducing the amount of units that you have to learn at the beginning can obviously help speed up your learning process. Now, taking this a step further, another good way to do this is to learn all of the units within each slot within the battalion and then pick your top units. So learn all of the heavy support and pick your top heavy support units, and then all of the elites, all of the troops, etc. So then you end up with your top units to choose from. Okay, so as promised, the second bonus tip. Now, some of you may have seen this already, however, it's still very relevant, especially when learning a new codex.
I'm not you, by the way.
No.
Make sure you have fun.
Okay, so there you go. That's my tips for learning a new codex. But what are your tips? Let everyone know in the comments box below. And if you want to see my recent new Necrons unboxing videos, then there is a playlist for you to check out. Beam me up!